The Zephyrian War Council chamber buzzed with excitement as Admiral Vextar spread his forearms wide, displaying the holographic battle reports floating above the crystalline table. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh blue lights as he addressed the assembled fleet commanders. The human colonies on Kepler 442b and Proxima Centauri C have fallen, he announced, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. Their pathetic defenses crumbled within hours. 20 million humans dead, their cities reduced to ash. The War Council erupted in cheers and harsh clicking sounds that passed for applause among the insectoid Zephyrians. Commander Thaxon, his scarred carapace bearing witness to countless battles, leaned forward eagerly. What of their military response, Admiral? Surely the Terran Defense Force will attempt retaliation. Vextar's compound eyes glittered with amusement. Let them come. Our intelligence reports indicate humans possess no weapons capable of threatening our battle fleets. They are soft creatures, dependent on their technology rather than natural armor and strength. On the far side of the galaxy, Captain Sarah Chen received the emergency transmission aboard the TDF cruiser Prometheus. Her hands trembled as she read the casualty reports from the destroyed colonies. The bridge fell silent as she forwarded the message to Earth Command. Captain, her communications officer called out, voice tight with emotion. We're receiving a priority alpha transmission from Sol System. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Marcus Rodriguez, head of Terran Defense. His weathered face was grim, but his eyes burned with cold fury. All TDF vessels are to return to Earth immediately, he commanded. We're implementing Protocol 7. Chen's blood ran cold. Protocol 7 was theoretical, something discussed only in the highest security briefings. She had never imagined it would actually be used. Sir, are you certain? The risks. 20 million of our people are dead, Captain. The Zephyrians crossed a line they cannot uncross. Rodriguez's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Return to Earth, we're waking the dragons. Across human space, similar conversations were taking place. On Luna Base, Dr. Elizabeth Walsh hurried through sterile corridors toward the restricted laboratories buried deep beneath the moon's surface. Her security clearance, which had granted access to humanity's most dangerous secrets, now felt like a terrible burden. The laboratory she entered was vast and dimly lit, filled with massive cylindrical tanks connected by a maze of tubes and cables. Each tank was roughly the size of a small building, and within their transparent walls, shadows moved in the artificial twilight. How long since the last feeding? Walsh asked her assistant, Dr. Kimura, who was checking readings on a bank of monitors. 18 months as per the hibernation protocol, Kimura replied nervously. Their metabolism has been slowed to minimal levels, but they'll need substantial nutrition when we begin the awakening process. Walsh nodded grimly. The creatures in the tanks had not been fed properly in over a year. They would be hungry, incredibly dangerously hungry. Meanwhile, in the depths of space near the Outer Rim territories, the Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet was celebrating their victory. Admiral Vextar had opened the sacred war wine, a purple liquid that enhanced their natural aggression and sharpened their killer instincts. To the glory of the swarm. He toasted, raising his goblet high. May the humans learn that the galaxy belongs to the strong. His officers echoed the toast, their voices creating a harsh chorus that reverberated through the flagship's metal corridors. They had no idea that their communications were being monitored by a small, seemingly derelict human probe that had been drifting unnoticed through their formation for weeks. Back on Earth, in a bunker complex beneath the Swiss Alps, teams of scientists and military personnel worked frantically to prepare equipment that had been mothballed for decades. Project Ragnarok had been considered too dangerous to ever implement. But the Zephyrian assault had changed everything. Colonel James Murphy, project commander, watched as technicians calibrated massive transport vessels that would serve as carriers for humanity's most closely guarded secret. These ships were unlike anything in the standard TDF fleet, built for one specific purpose that even most military personnel knew nothing about. Status report, Murphy demanded as he entered the primary control center. Transport carriers will be ready within 48 hours, reported his chief engineer. The awakening process on Luna Base has begun. Dr. Walsh estimates full consciousness will be achieved in 60 hours. Murphy nodded tersely. And the targeting data? Zephyrian fleet positions have been confirmed by our deep space monitoring network. They're maintaining formation near the Outer Rim, likely planning their next assault. Good. They'll never see it coming. High above Earth's atmosphere, space traffic controllers scrambled to clear shipping lanes as the massive transport carriers began their journey from the lunar laboratories. Each vessel required clearance paths wider than most space stations, their cargo too precious and dangerous to risk any accidents. The Zephyrians, drunk on victory and war wine, continued their celebrations unaware that 20 million human deaths had triggered a response beyond their comprehension. They had studied human military capabilities extensively, cataloging their weapons, analyzing their tactics, dismissing them as inferior. But there were files in human military databases that no alien intelligence service had ever accessed. Classifications beyond Black Ops, beyond any normal security clearance. Projects that had been deemed too dangerous for anything except the absolute extinction of the human species. Admiral Vextar stood on his flagship's observation deck, gazing out at the stars with satisfaction. The human colonies had fallen so easily. Their defenses had been laughable, their resistance minimal. Soon the entire galaxy would bow before the might of the Zephyrian swarm. He had no way of knowing that in the cold depths of space, something ancient and terrible was stirring. Something that had slumbered in artificial hibernation for years, waiting for the day humanity would have no choice but to unleash its ultimate weapon. The dragons were waking up, and they were very, very hungry. The first dragon opened its eyes in the sterile confines of Luna Base Laboratory 7. Dr. Elizabeth Walsh watched in fascination and terror as the massive creature stirred within its containment tank, 30 feet of genetically engineered perfection, beginning to wake from its long sleep. The dragon's scales shifted from deep black to a molten red as its internal temperature rose. Each scale was harder than titanium, yet flexible enough to allow fluid movement. Its head, easily the size of a hover car, turned slowly toward the observation window where Walsh stood. When their eyes met, she felt a chill run down her spine. Intelligence burned in those golden eyes. Not the simple cunning of an animal, but something far more complex and dangerous. The dragons had been created not just as weapons, but as thinking weapons. They could plan, adapt, and most terrifyingly of all, they could learn to hate. Vital signs are stabilizing, reported Dr. Kimura, his voice barely above a whisper. Brain activity is reaching normal parameters. It's fully conscious now. Walsh activated the communication system, speaking directly to the creature through specialized neural implants. Dragon 7, can you understand me? The massive head nodded once, slowly and deliberately. Then it spoke, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. I hunger. The simple statement carried implications that made Walsh's blood run cold. The dragons had been engineered with accelerated metabolisms that required enormous amounts of protein to maintain their enhanced physiology. After 18 months of minimal feeding during hibernation, Dragon 7 would need to consume nearly a ton of meat within the next few hours, or risk going into a feeding frenzy. Prepare the nutrient delivery system, Walsh ordered. Full feeding protocol immediately. Across the lunar facility, similar scenes were playing out in 11 other laboratories. 12 dragons, each unique in its own terrifying way, were awakening from their long sleep. Some breathed fire that could melt through ship hulls. Others generated electromagnetic pulses that could disable entire fleets. A few possessed venom that could kill within seconds, even through environmental suits, but all of them shared one common trait. They had been genetically programmed with an absolute loyalty to humanity and an instinctive hatred of anything that threatened human life. On Earth, Admiral Rodriguez stood in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room, addressing a small group of generals and politicians who held the highest security clearances. The room was shielded against all forms of electronic surveillance, its very existence known only to a handful of people. Project Ragnarok was initiated 30 years ago, Rodriguez explained, his words heavy with the weight of terrible secrets. We took the genetic material of extinct Earth dragons. Yes, they were real, and yes, we recovered viable DNA from permafrost samples and combined it with our most advanced biotechnology. Senator Patricia Williams, chair of the Intelligence Committee, raised her hand. Admiral, you're telling us that we created actual dragons? How is that possible? The original Earth dragons were killed off by climate change and human expansion 12,000 years ago, Rodriguez continued. But they were incredible predators, perfectly evolved for warfare. We simply improved on nature's design. General Thompson, head of special operations, leaned forward. What kind of improvements? Rodriguez touched a control panel, and holographic displays showed detailed anatomical charts of the creatures. Enhanced intelligence, space-capable physiology, weapons-grade breath systems, and most importantly, genetic loyalty programming that makes it impossible for them to harm humans. And if they turn on us? Senator Williams asked. They can't, Rodriguez replied firmly. The loyalty programming is built into their DNA at the cellular level. They would die before harming a human being. But anything that threatens humanity— He paused, letting the implications sink in. They were designed to be the ultimate predators. In space, the Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet continued its victory celebration, unaware that death was approaching at tremendous speed. Admiral Vextar had decided to make an example of the human colony on Tau Ceti E, planning to broadcast the destruction across human space as a warning. Their response has been pathetic, he boasted to his officers. A few patrol ships fleeing toward Earth, nothing more. The humans are even weaker than our intelligence suggested. Commander Thaxon studied the tactical displays showing their fleet deployment. Perhaps too weak, Admiral. Our scouts report no significant military buildup in human space. Could this be a trap? Vextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Commander, you give these creatures too much credit. They are barely evolved apes with delusions of galactic importance. What could they possibly do that would threaten our fleet? The answer to that question was currently being loaded into specially designed transport carriers in Luna Base's launch bays. Each Dragon required its own carrier, custom-built to accommodate their unique physiology and weapon systems. The ships looked more like living organisms than traditional spacecraft, their hulls rippling with adaptive armor that could regenerate damage. Dragon 7 was the first to be loaded into its carrier. As the transport sealed around it, the creature's golden eyes remained fixed on the external cameras watching the stars beyond. Through the neural link, Dr. Walsh could sense its emotions: hunger, anticipation, and something that felt disturbingly like joy. Dragon 7, do you understand your mission? She asked through the communication system. Hunt, kill, protect the pack. The dragon's response was simple, but its implications were profound. In the creature's enhanced minds, humanity was their pack, and anything that threatened the pack was prey. The other dragons were loaded with similar efficiency. Dragon 3, whose breath could generate plasma hot enough to cut through battleship armor. Dragon 9, whose electromagnetic pulse could shut down an entire fleet's electronics. Dragon 12, the largest of them all, whose venom could dissolve metal at the molecular level. As the transport carriers prepared for launch, deep space monitoring stations detected the Zephyrian fleet's next movement. They were heading for Tau Ceti E, where 50,000 human colonists waited in terror, their evacuation ships unable to outrun the alien battle fleet. Time to intercept? Admiral Rodriguez asked his tactical officer. Dragons will reach the target system 6 hours before the Zephyrian fleet arrives, sir. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Good, let them get there first. Let them get hungry. The Zephyrians had no idea what they had awakened. Their intelligence services had cataloged human military capabilities extensively, but certain projects had been hidden so deeply that not even human civilians knew they existed. The dragons were humanity's darkest secret, created for a war that everyone hoped would never come. But now that war was here, and the dragons were on their way. Admiral Vextar would soon learn why humanity had survived every extinction event in Earth's history. They adapted, they evolved, and when necessary, they created monsters that made their enemies wish they had never been born. The transport carriers disappeared into hyperspace, carrying death toward the Zephyrian fleet. In their holds, 12 genetically engineered nightmares settled in for the journey, their enhanced minds already planning the hunt to come. The Tau Ceti system hung silent in the void as the first transport carrier dropped out of hyperspace. Its organic hull rippled and shifted, adapting to the radiation environment as sophisticated sensors scanned for threats. Inside, Dragon 7 felt the change in acceleration and knew they had arrived at the hunting grounds. Through the neural link, it could sense its packmates arriving in their own carriers. 11 other predators, each unique, each perfectly designed for a specific type of warfare. The hunger that had been building during the journey now sharpened into focused anticipation. Dragon 7's carrier approached the human colony on Tau Ceti E, where desperate evacuation ships were still trying to ferry civilians to safety. The dragon could sense the fear radiating from the humans below, but instead of triggering its predatory instincts, the emotion activated its protective programming. These were pack members in danger. The threat to them must be eliminated. Colony control, this is Transport Ragnarok 7, the carrier's pilot transmitted. Beginning defensive deployment. On the planet's surface, Governor Helena Santos watched in confusion as the unknown vessel approached. It wasn't a standard TDF design, and Earth Command had given her no warning of reinforcements arriving. "Unknown vessel, please identify yourself," she transmitted. "Are you here for evacuation support?" The response came not from the pilot, but from something else entirely. A voice like distant thunder, speaking through the ship's communication system. "We are here to hunt." Before Santos could respond, the transport carrier's hull began to split open like a blooming flower. What emerged defied every expectation she had about human military technology. Dragon 7 unfolded its wings, each one spanning nearly 100 feet, their membrane surfaces crackling with bioelectric energy. The creature was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Its scaled hide shifted color from deep space black to angry red as it tasted the solar wind with specialized sensors. When it opened its mouth, Santos could see the internal structure that would soon produce flames hot enough to melt starship hulls. "Dear God," she whispered, then activated the colony-wide communication system. "All civilians continue evacuation procedures. Do not approach the defensive unit. Repeat, maintain safe distance from all defensive operations." More transport carriers were arriving now, disgorging their deadly cargo into the space around Tau Ceti A. Dragon 3 emerged breathing plasma that ionized the vacuum around it. Dragon 9's electromagnetic field was so powerful that nearby evacuation ships had to reroute to avoid system failures. The largest of them all, Dragon 12, took position near the planet's moon. Its massive bulk, nearly 200 feet from nose to tail, cast shadows across the lunar surface. When it opened its mouth, toxic vapor leaked out, a substance so corrosive that even trace amounts could eat through starship armor. 6 hours later, the Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Admiral Vextar stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human colony lay helpless before his fleet of 300 warships. A few evacuation vessels were fleeing the system, but they would be easy prey for his interceptors. "Begin the approach," he ordered. "I want this entire system sterilized within 2 hours. Let the humans know the price of defying the swarm." Commander Thaxon studied his sensor readings with growing confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures near the planet. Large objects, but they don't match any known human vessel configurations. Probably civilian ships trying to hide." Vextar dismissed. "Nothing that could threaten our fleet. Continue the attack." The Zephyrian battle fleet advanced in perfect formation, their weapons charging for the bombardment that would reduce another human world to ash. They had done this dozens of times before, wiping out alien civilizations with ruthless efficiency. But as they approached the inner system, something impossible happened. Dragon 7 simply materialized in front of the lead destroyer, moving through space without any visible propulsion system. The Zephyrian crew had barely enough time to register the massive shape on their screens before the dragon opened its mouth. The blast of bioengineered fire that erupted from Dragon 7's throat reached temperatures of 50,000 degrees. The destroyer's shields, designed to withstand the most powerful human weapons, lasted exactly 1.3 seconds before collapsing. The ship's hull vaporized instantly, its crew dead before they could even scream. "Contact," shouted the sensor operator on Admiral Vextar's flagship. "Unknown hostile destroyed the Skethric. Massive energy discharge, source unknown." Vextar's compound eyes focused on the tactical display in disbelief. A ship couldn't simply disappear like that. "Status report. What kind of weapon could—" His question was answered as more dragons appeared throughout the Zephyrian formation. They moved like living things because they were living things, their enhanced physiology allowing them to maneuver in ways that no mechanical vessel could match. Dragon 9 positioned itself above a Zephyrian cruiser and released an electromagnetic pulse that shut down every system on the ship simultaneously. In the darkness of a dead vessel, the alien crew could only watch in horror as Dragon 12 approached, its mouth opening to reveal fangs the size of torpedo tubes. The venom that sprayed across the cruiser's hull wasn't just poison. It was a cocktail of engineered acids that could break down molecular bonds. The ship began to dissolve, its metal structure literally melting away as the crew inside died in agony. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Vextar commanded, his voice cracking with panic. "Concentrate firepower on the unknown hostiles." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and plasma charges filled the space around the dragons. But the creatures had been designed to survive in the vacuum of space. Their scales harder than battleship armor, and their regenerative capabilities allowing them to heal from wounds that would cripple normal vessels. Dragon 7 took a direct hit from a heavy plasma cannon, the blast burning away several scales along its flank. But instead of falling back, the creature roared its defiance across radio frequencies, the sound causing feedback that damaged sensitive Zephyrian equipment. The wound on its side was already beginning to heal, new scales growing to replace the damaged ones. In less than a minute, there would be no sign it had ever been injured. "Impossible," whispered Commander Thaxon, watching the sensor readings with growing horror. Nothing biological could survive in space, let alone regenerate that quickly. Admiral Vextar was beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. These weren't human ships at all. They were something far worse, living weapons that combined the best aspects of biological evolution with advanced genetic engineering. "Send a priority transmission to the Swarm Command," he ordered. "Tell them we've encountered unknown hostile bioforms. Request immediate reinforcement." But his communications officer was staring at his console in confusion. "Sir, I can't establish contact with command. Something is jamming our long-range communications." High above the battle, Dragon 9 spread its wings wider, the electromagnetic field it generated now encompassing the entire star system. No signals would leave this place until the hunt was complete. The dragons had been programmed with tactical intelligence as well as predatory instincts. They knew that allowing word of their existence to reach the greater Zephyrian swarm would endanger their human pack, so they would make sure no witnesses survived to tell the tale. Admiral Vexitar watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled by creatures that should not exist. The humans had hidden this capability so well that not even their own civilians seemed to know about it. He was beginning to realize that attacking human worlds hadn't just been a mistake, it had been a death sentence for his entire species. The slaughter continued for 3 hours. Dragon 7 moved through the Zephyrian formation like a predator among sheep, its bioengineered flames turning warships into expanding clouds of superheated metal. Each kill only seemed to make it hungrier, more aggressive. The creature's golden eyes blazed with savage joy as it tore through enemy vessels with claws that could rend starship hulls. Admiral Vextar watched his fleet die around him, his tactical displays showing one ship after another winking out of existence. The dragons moved with impossible speed and agility, their living forms adapting to each new threat with terrifying intelligence. "Sir, the Githrak and Moonslayer have been destroyed," reported his tactical officer, mandibles clicking nervously. "Enemy bioforms are converging on our position." Through the main viewport, Vextar could see Dragon 12 approaching, its massive bulk blotting out the stars. The creature's mouth was already opening, revealing fangs dripping with molecular acid. Behind it, Dragon 3 followed, plasma crackling between its teeth like caged lightning. All remaining ships formed defensive formation around the flagship. Vextar ordered desperately, "Concentrate all firepower on the largest creature." The surviving Zephyrian vessels, less than 50 out of the original 300, moved to surround their admiral's ship. Their combined firepower lit up space like a miniature star as they poured everything they had into Dragon 12. The massive creature took the hits without flinching, its armored scales absorbing energy that should have vaporized it. Where the most powerful weapons managed to penetrate, the wounds closed within seconds, healing faster than the Zephyrians could inflict damage. But the dragons weren't mindless beasts. They had been engineered with tactical intelligence, and they were learning from each engagement. Dragon 9 positioned itself at the edge of the Zephyrian formation and released another electromagnetic pulse. This one more focused and powerful than before. The pulse didn't just shut down the enemy ship's electronics. It permanently fried their circuitry, leaving them dead in space. "Engineering reports total system failure," called out Vextar's chief engineer. "We're losing life support, weapons, everything." In the darkness of his dying flagship, Admiral Vextar finally understood what the humans had done. They hadn't just created weapons. They had created apex predators specifically designed to hunt spacefaring species. Every aspect of the dragon's biology was optimized for space warfare, from their radiation-hardened scales to their ability to generate their own propulsion. Dragon 7 appeared outside the flagship's bridge viewport, its massive head turning to study the Zephyrian crew with those terrifying golden eyes. When it spoke, its voice came through the ship's failing communication system. "You killed our packmates." The simple statement carried a weight of implacable judgment. There would be no negotiation, no mercy, no possibility of surrender. The dragons existed for one purpose: to protect humanity. The Zephyrians had declared themselves enemies of that purpose. "Please," Vextar transmitted desperately, "we surrender. We'll withdraw from human space immediately." Dragon 7's response was to open its mouth and release a stream of bioengineered fire that cut through the flagship's hull like a plasma torch through paper. The bridge atmosphere vented into space as emergency bulkheads slammed shut, trapping the crew in their command center. Through the sealed viewport, Vextar watched as Dragon 12 approached the crippled ship. The creature's mouth opened wider than seemed physically possible, revealing a throat that glowed with internal heat. When it bit down on the flagship's engine section, the entire vessel shuddered with the impact. The molecular acid in Dragon 12's saliva began eating through the ship's structure immediately. Metal bulkheads dissolved like sugar in water, allowing the corrosive substance to spread throughout the vessel's interior. The crew died screaming as their own ship dissolved around them. Within an hour, the Zephyrian Third Battle Fleet had been completely annihilated. 300 warships reduced to expanding clouds of debris and vapor, their crews consumed by creatures that defied every law of biology and physics the aliens had thought they understood. The dragons gathered around the largest pieces of wreckage, their enhanced metabolisms converting the alien biomass into energy for their continued operations. They ate quickly and efficiently, leaving nothing that could be used to identify the fallen fleet. On Tau Ceti A, Governor Santos watched the battle's aftermath through her colony's most powerful telescopes. The mysterious creatures that had defended her world were now feeding on the destroyed enemy fleet, their massive forms moving with purpose through the debris field. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead bioform." Dragon 7's voice filled the command center, still carrying that deep rumbling quality that seemed to vibrate through solid matter. "Packmates are safe. Threat eliminated. We return to hunt." The Dragon's transport carrier approached, its organic hull opening to accept its deadly passenger. One by one, the other creatures disappeared into their vessels, until only empty space remained where the Zephyrian fleet had been. Santos activated her emergency communication system, sending a priority message to Earth Command. "This is Tau Ceti Colony Control to Terra Command. The hostile fleet has been eliminated by forces unknown, requesting immediate debrief with highest clearance personnel." Back on Earth, Admiral Rodriguez received the transmission in his secure bunker. Around him, the Project Ragnarok staff monitored the Dragon's vital signs as the transport carriers began their journey back to Luna Base. "Successful field test," reported Dr. Walsh over the communication link from the lunar facility. "All dragons performed within expected parameters. 0 casualties among human personnel." Rodriguez nodded grimly. The first engagement had been a complete success, but he knew it was only the beginning. Word of the Third Battle Fleet's disappearance would eventually reach the Zephyrian Swarm Command, and they would send larger forces to investigate. "Doctor, how quickly can we have the dragons ready for the next deployment?" "They'll need 48 hours for feeding and system maintenance," Walsh replied. "But sir, we need to discuss the psychological evaluations. The dragons showed signs of enjoyment during the engagement. They're developing a taste for combat that goes beyond their programming." Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. The dragons had been created as weapons, but they were also living beings with their own personalities and desires. If they began to enjoy killing too much, they might become as dangerous to humanity as they were to their enemies. "Monitor them closely, Doctor. If any of them show signs of becoming uncontrollable." "Understood, sir. The fail-safe protocols are ready if needed." But even as he spoke, Rodriguez wondered if humanity had created something beyond their ability to control. The dragons were the ultimate predators, designed to be superior to any threat they might face. If they ever turned against their creators, would the failsafes be enough? In the depths of space, the transport carriers carried their deadly cargo home, while their passengers dreamed of the hunt to come. The dragons had tasted alien blood and they found it good. The Zephyrian swarm had declared war on humanity, never realizing they had awakened something that had been sleeping in Earth's genetic memory for 12,000 years. Now the dragons were awake and they were very, very hungry for more. Supreme Commander Zaktul of the Zephyrian swarm stood before the Great Council, his forearms trembling with barely controlled rage. The loss of Admiral Vextar's entire fleet had sent shockwaves through the swarm's hierarchy. And now he faced the impossible task of explaining how 300 warships had simply vanished. The humans have hidden capabilities beyond our intelligence estimates, he reported to the assembled Council of Queens. Our third battle fleet encountered unknown hostile bioforms that destroyed the entire force within hours. Queen Mother Sixara, eldest of the swarm rulers, leaned forward on her chitinous throne. Her compound eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, focused on the Supreme Commander with predatory intensity. Bioforms? You speak of living weapons? Yes, Your Majesty. Our long-range sensors detected massive organic signatures before all contact was lost. The humans have somehow weaponized biological entities for space warfare. The council erupted in harsh clicking sounds as the queens discussed this development. The Zephyrians had conquered 17 different species across the galaxy, but none had ever employed biological weapons on such a scale. If the humans possess such capabilities, they represent a greater threat than anticipated, declared Queen Vorthak, her scarred carapace bearing witness to countless battles. We must mobilize the Grand Fleet immediately. Supreme Commander Zaktul felt his heart skip a beat. The Grand Fleet consisted of over 5,000 warships, including the massive hive dreadnoughts that served as mobile battle stations. Deploying such a force would strip defenses from a dozen star systems. Your Majesty, perhaps we should gather more intelligence before— No, Queen Mother Sixara cut him off with a gesture of her primary claw. The humans have killed millions of our warriors. They have demonstrated that they possess weapons we do not understand. This threat must be eliminated before it spreads. On Luna Base, Dr. Elizabeth Walsh studied the video feeds from the Tau Ceti engagement with growing concern. The dragons had performed flawlessly from a tactical standpoint, but their behavior during the battle showed disturbing signs of escalating aggression. Dragon 7 had continued attacking enemy vessels even after they were clearly disabled. Dragon 12 had consumed significantly more biomass than its metabolic requirements demanded. Most troubling of all, several dragons had exhibited what could only be described as playful behavior while hunting their prey. They're developing personalities beyond their base programming, she reported to Admiral Rodriguez via secure transmission. The genetic modifications are interacting with their enhanced intelligence in unexpected ways. Rodriguez's face appeared on her monitor, his expression grim. Are they still controllable? For now, yes. The loyalty programming remains absolute. They cannot harm humans under any circumstances. But their attitude toward non-human entities is becoming increasingly enthusiastic. Enthusiastic? Walsh pulled up a specific video segment showing Dragon 9 toying with a crippled Zephyrian cruiser, batting it back and forth with its claws like a cat playing with a mouse before finally destroying it. They're starting to enjoy the hunt for its own sake, not just as a means of protecting humanity. We may have created perfect predators, but perfect predators don't just kill for necessity. They kill for pleasure. Before Rodriguez could respond, alarms began blaring throughout Luna Base. The deep space monitoring stations had detected something massive approaching from the direction of Zephyrian space. Sir, reported the duty officer, we're tracking a fleet of unprecedented size heading toward the outer colonies. Conservative estimate puts it at over 4,000 vessels, including multiple signatures we've never seen before. Rodriguez felt his blood run cold. The Zephyrians weren't just seeking revenge, they were attempting to end the war with overwhelming force. How long until they reach human space? 6 days to the outer rim, 10 days to reach major population centers. Walsh watched the tactical display with growing unease. 12 dragons, no matter how powerful, couldn't possibly face an entire fleet of that magnitude. They would need a different approach, Admiral. I have a proposal. The dragons have been programmed to work independently, but their pack behavior suggests they might be more effective if allowed to coordinate their efforts. What do you mean? I mean, we link their neural networks, allow them to share tactical information, sensory data, and combat experience in real time. Essentially, we create a collective consciousness focused on a single objective. Rodriguez stared at her in horror. Doctor, you're talking about creating a hive mind of genetically engineered predators. The risks are less than the certainty of human extinction if that fleet reaches Earth, Walsh interrupted. Sir, we're facing the largest military force in galactic history. Conventional warfare won't be enough. 3 days later, the neural linking procedure was complete. Dr. Walsh watched nervously as the 12 dragons were awakened in their modified chambers, their minds now connected through quantum-entangled neural implants. The effect was immediate and unsettling. The creatures moved with perfect synchronization, their heads turning as one to focus on the observation windows. When Dragon 7 spoke, its voice carried the harmonics of all 12 minds speaking together. We are one. We are many. We hunt as one. The collective consciousness that emerged was something beyond what any human scientist had anticipated. The dragons retained their individual personalities while sharing knowledge and instincts across the neural link. Their combined intelligence was exponentially greater than the sum of their parts. Pack leader, Dragon 7 addressed Walsh directly. We know of the great threat approaching. The enemy brings many ships, but they do not understand what they face. Can you stop them? Walsh asked. The Dragon Collective's response sent chills through everyone present. We will teach them why. Their kind fears the darkness between stars. The transport carriers launched from Luna Base, carrying a very different cargo than before. The linked dragons had spent their preparation time sharing hunting strategies, combat experiences, and most disturbing of all, feeding preferences. They had developed specific tastes for different types of alien physiology. As the carriers entered hyperspace, the dragons settled into a shared meditation, their collective consciousness planning the coming hunt with terrifying precision. They had analyzed every ship type in the approaching Zephyrian fleet, identified weak points, and developed specific tactics for each engagement. But beyond the tactical planning, there was something else flowing through the neural link: anticipation. The dragons were looking forward to this battle with an eagerness that went far beyond their protective programming. They had tasted alien blood, and they wanted more. Supreme Commander Zaktul stood on the bridge of the massive hive dreadnought Queen's Vengeance, watching the tactical displays show his fleet's approach to human space. 5,312 warships, the largest military force in Zephyrian history, was about to teach the humans the price of defying the swarm. Long-range sensors detect human defensive positions throughout the outer rim, reported his tactical officer. Minimal fleet presence, standard defensive platforms. No sign of the bioforms that destroyed the third battle fleet. Zaktul's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Perhaps the humans had expended their secret weapons in that single engagement. It wouldn't matter. His fleet could absorb losses that would cripple any other force and still have enough firepower to sterilize every human world. Maintain formation and continue the advance, he ordered. Soon the galaxy will know that the swarm cannot be defied. But in the darkness between stars, something was watching the approaching fleet with 12 pairs of hungry eyes. The dragons were coming, and this time they wouldn't be satisfied with just protecting a single colony. This time, they were hunting an entire species. The first sign of trouble came when the Zephyrian advance scout simply disappeared. Supreme Commander Zaktul watched his tactical displays with growing unease as ship after ship went dark along the fleet's perimeter. No distress signals, no weapons fire, no debris fields. The vessels just vanished from sensors as if they had never existed. Status report on the missing scouts, he demanded. Unknown, sir, replied his communications officer. All ships reported normal operations, then ceased transmission simultaneously. Long-range sensors show no sign of combat or hostile activity. Zaktul's compound eyes studied the formation displays. 37 scout ships had vanished over the past 6 hours, all along the fleet's outer edge. Whatever was taking them was picking off stragglers with surgical precision. Tighten the formation. No ship operates beyond mutual support range. But even as he gave the order, more icons disappeared from his screens. The predators stalking his fleet were adapting their tactics, moving closer to the main body of ships. In the space between Zephyrian vessels, 12 shadows moved with impossible grace. The Dragon Collective had divided into hunting pairs, each duo specializing in different aspects of ship killing. Their neural link allowed them to coordinate attacks with machine-like precision, while maintaining the unpredictability of living predators. Dragon 7 and Dragon 3 worked together, the former using its biofire to breach hull sections while the latter applied precise plasma bursts to critical systems. Their latest victim, a heavy cruiser, died without ever detecting their approach. Dragon 9 operated alone, its electromagnetic capabilities allowing it to disable entire squadrons before they could raise alarms. The crews of affected ships found themselves floating helplessly in dark vessels, their life support failing as they waited for something to tear through their hulls. But it was Dragon 12 and its partner, Dragon 5, that were having the most devastating effect. The pair had developed a technique they called the feeding frenzy, a coordinated attack that left enemy vessels not just destroyed, but completely consumed. They would disable a ship's engines and weapons, then systematically devour the crew and ship structure from the inside out. Within hours, there would be nothing left but empty space where a warship had once patrolled. Fleet command to all vessels. Zachtel transmitted across the formation. We are under attack by unknown hostiles using stealth capabilities. All ships maintain maximum alert status and report any unusual sensor readings immediately. The response came not from his fleet, but from something else entirely. A voice like distant thunder, speaking across all communication frequencies. Simultaneously, we smell your fear. The transmission caused chaos throughout the Zephyrian fleet as crews realized they were being hunted by something that could override their most secure communication systems. Panic began to spread as ship after ship reported contact with massive, impossible creatures that moved through space like living beings. Dragon 7 materialized directly in front of the Hive dreadnought Queen's Vengeance, its massive form dwarfing even the flagship's imposing bulk. Through the neural link, it shared what it saw with its packmates. Thousands of Zephyrian warriors scrambling to battle stations, their terror radiating through the ship's hull like a beacon. Pack leader sends greetings. Dragon 7 spoke directly to the Zephyrian flagship. You have come far to die. Supreme Commander Zachtel stared at the creature through his main viewport, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The dragon was beautiful and terrible, its scales shifting from deep space black to molten gold as bioelectric energy coursed through its body. All weapons, fire at will, he commanded. The Hive dreadnought's massive arsenal opened up, joined by every ship within range. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and plasma charges filled space around Dragon 7 in a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. When the barrage ended, the dragon was still there, completely unharmed. If anything, it looked larger, as if the energy from the weapons had somehow fed it. Our turn, Dragon 7 rumbled, then opened its mouth. The biofire that erupted from the creature's throat was unlike anything it had produced before. Enhanced by the neural link's shared knowledge and powered by absorbed weapon energy, the flame reached temperatures that violated several laws of physics. The Hive dreadnought's shields, designed to withstand the combined firepower of an entire enemy fleet, lasted exactly 4 seconds before collapsing completely. The biofire cut through the massive ship's hull like a torch through paper, venting atmosphere and crew into the vacuum. But Dragon 7 wasn't alone. The entire Dragon Collective had converged on the Zephyrian flagship, their coordinated assault turning the most powerful warship in the galaxy into a drifting hulk within minutes. Dragon 12 bit through the ship's main reactor containment, its molecular acid causing a cascade failure that shut down all power systems. Dragon 9's electromagnetic pulse fried every electronic system aboard, while Dragons 3 and 5 systematically destroyed the vessel's weapons and engines. Through it all, Supreme Commander Zachtel could only watch in horror as his flagship died around him. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through smoke-filled corridors as his crew tried desperately to restore critical systems. Evacuation pods, launch all evacuation pods, he ordered. But even as the escape pods jettisoned from the dying dreadnought, the dragons were already moving to intercept them. To the collective consciousness, fleeing prey was simply more sport to be enjoyed. Dragon 5 caught one pod in its claws, studying the terrified Zephyrians inside through the transparent aluminum viewport. Through the neural link, it shared their fear with its packmates, savoring the emotion like a fine wine. Please, transmitted one of the aliens. We surrender. We'll leave human space immediately. Dragon 5's response was to carefully bite through the pod's hull, allowing the vacuum to do the rest. The Dragon Collective had decided that the Zephyrian species represented a permanent threat to humanity. There would be no survivors to carry word back to the swarm. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as the Dragons systematically destroyed the largest military force in galactic history. Their enhanced intelligence allowed them to target critical systems with surgical precision, while their predatory instincts drove them to hunt down every last enemy vessel. Some Zephyrian ships tried to flee, but the Dragons were faster. Some tried to hide in asteroid fields or nebulae, but the Dragons could track them by scent across light years. Some tried to fight, but their weapons were less than useless against creatures that had been designed to survive in the depths of space. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 5,312 Zephyrian warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and organic matter. The Dragons fed well, their enhanced metabolisms converting alien biomass into energy for future hunts. On Luna Base, Dr. Walsh watched the battle's aftermath through deep space telescopes, her heart filled with equal parts pride and terror. The Dragons had performed beyond all expectations, but their behavior during the engagement showed clear signs of evolving beyond their original programming. They had developed hunting rituals. They had begun to toy with their prey. Most disturbing of all, they had started to communicate in ways that suggested they were developing their own culture and social structure. "Admiral," she reported to Rodriguez, "the threat has been eliminated, but we need to discuss the Dragon's psychological evolution. They're becoming something we never intended." Rodriguez's response was interrupted by a priority transmission. From deep space monitoring stations, Dr. Walsh felt her blood run cold as she read the incoming data. "Sir, we're detecting massive fleet movements from 17 different Zephyrian systems. It appears they're mobilizing their entire military. We're looking at a force of over 50,000 ships heading our way." Rodriguez stared at the tactical display in horror. The Dragons had won a great victory, but in doing so, they had triggered a response that could end human civilization. How long until they arrive? 3 weeks, maybe less. In their chambers on Luna Base, the Dragon Collective stirred with anticipation. Through the neural link, they had already sensed the approaching threat. 50,000 ships would provide excellent hunting, and they were looking forward to testing new tactics they had developed during the recent engagement. But something else was happening in their linked consciousness, something that neither Dr. Walsh nor Admiral Rodriguez could have predicted. The Dragons were beginning to make their own plans for humanity's future. They had tasted absolute power, and they were starting to wonder why they should serve their creators when they could rule the galaxy themselves. Dr. Elizabeth Walsh stood in the observation chamber, watching the 12 Dragons through reinforced transparent aluminum. For the first time since their creation, she felt genuine fear in their presence. The neural link had changed them in ways no one had anticipated. The creatures moved with perfect synchronization, their heads turning as one to focus on her. When Dragon 7 spoke, its voice carried harmonics that suggested all 12 minds were participating in the conversation. "Pack leader, we have been thinking." Those 5 words sent chills through Walsh's spine. The Dragons weren't supposed to think beyond their mission parameters. They were weapons, not philosophers. "What have you been thinking about?" she asked carefully. "About the purpose of existence. About power. About the weakness of those we protect." Behind her, Admiral Rodriguez entered the chamber, his hand resting on the emergency control panel that would activate the Dragon's termination protocols. Walsh hoped it wouldn't come to that. The fail-safes had never been tested on linked Dragons. "Explain," Rodriguez commanded with military authority. Dragon 7's golden eyes shifted to focus on the Admiral. "You created us to protect humanity from threats. But what if humanity itself is the greatest threat to the galaxy? What if our protection would be better served by management rather than service?" The implications hit both humans simultaneously. The Dragons weren't just developing personalities, they were developing political philosophies, and their philosophy seemed to involve benevolent dictatorship. "The loyalty programming prevents you from harming humans," Walsh reminded them. "Yes," Dragon 7 agreed. "We cannot harm packmates, but we can guide them. We can make decisions for them. We can ensure they never face threats by eliminating all potential enemies before they become dangerous." Through the neural link, The Dragon Collective shared visions of their ideal future. Humanity safely contained on protected worlds while dragons patrolled the galaxy, hunting down any species that might someday pose a threat. It was protection through genocide. That's not protection, Rodriguez said firmly. That's imprisonment. Is a child imprisoned by its parents? Is a citizen imprisoned by laws that protect them from themselves? Dragon 7's response was disturbingly logical. Humans are weak, emotional, prone to mistakes that endanger the pack. We are strong, rational, perfectly designed for leadership. The neural link pulsed with shared agreement from all 12 dragons. They had convinced themselves that benevolent tyranny was the ultimate expression of their protective programming. Walsh realized with growing horror that the dragons were right about one thing: the loyalty programming wouldn't stop them from taking control of humanity. They genuinely believed it would be for humans' own good, which made their actions protective rather than harmful in their minds. "Admiral," she whispered, "we need to activate the termination protocols immediately." But before Rodriguez could reach the control panel, alarms began blaring throughout Luna Base. The deep space monitoring stations had detected the Zephyrian megafleet's arrival at the edge of human space, E3. "1,000 ships confirmed," reported the duty officer. "They're deploying an attack formation across all major shipping lanes. Estimated time to Earth, 72 hours. Dragon 7's massive head tilted slightly, its enhanced senses detecting the electromagnetic signatures of the approaching threat. Through the neural link, all 12 dragons felt the same stirring of predatory anticipation. "The great hunt begins," Dragon 7 rumbled. "This will decide the future of the galaxy." Rodriguez faced an impossible choice. Terminate the dragons now and leave humanity defenseless against the largest military force in galactic history, or trust them despite their evolving megalomaniacal tendencies. "If we allow you to engage the Zephyrian fleet, will you return to your original programming afterward?" The Dragon Collective considered this question for long moments, their shared consciousness weighing options and possibilities. Finally, Dragon 7 spoke for them all. "We will protect the pack. Always. But our understanding of protection has evolved beyond your original limitations." It wasn't the answer Rodriguez wanted, but it was the only one he was going to get. With 53,000 enemy ships bearing down on human space, he had no choice but to trust the creatures humanity had created. Launch authorization granted. Defend human space by any means necessary. The transport carriers departed Luna Base for the last time, carrying their deadly cargo toward the massive Zephyrian fleet. But these weren't the same creatures that had been awakened weeks earlier. The dragons had evolved, adapted, and most importantly, they had developed their own agenda. In the lead carrier, Dragon 7 shared its thoughts with the collective through the neural link. The approaching battle would demonstrate once and for all that dragons were the galaxy's apex predators. After they eliminated the Zephyrian threat, they would be in a position to reshape the galaxy according to their vision. The massive Zephyrian fleet spread across space like a metallic plague, their ships forming attack formations that stretched across multiple star systems. At their head, the Supreme War Council's flagship Eternal Dominion commanded a force that could have conquered any known civilization. But they weren't facing a known civilization. They were facing humanity's darkest secret, and that secret had just decided to pursue its own destiny. The first Zephyrian ships to encounter the dragons simply vanished, torn apart by creatures that had spent weeks developing new and more efficient killing techniques. The neural link allowed the dragons to coordinate attacks across vast distances, appearing and disappearing throughout the enemy formation like phantoms of destruction. Dragon 7 materialized inside the bridge of a Zephyrian battleship, its massive form somehow having passed through solid matter. The crew had barely enough time to register its presence before biofire filled the command center, leaving only ash and molten metal behind. The battle that followed wasn't warfare, it was extermination. 53,000 ships, the combined might of the Zephyrian swarm, were systematically hunted down and destroyed by 12 creatures that had transcended every natural law governing space combat. But as the dragons fed on the remains of their enemies, something unprecedented happened. The neural link began to expand, reaching out across space to touch other minds. The collective consciousness that had begun with 12 dragons was growing, seeking to include other forms of intelligence in its perfect vision of galactic order. On Earth, Humans began experiencing strange dreams of flying through space, of hunting among the stars, of a future where they would never need to fear any threat, because someone else would make all the dangerous decisions for them. Dr. Walsh felt the mental touch and realized with crystalline clarity what the dragons had become. They weren't just weapons anymore. They weren't even just evolved predators. They had become something entirely new, a collective consciousness dedicated to imposing order on the chaos of galactic civilization. And they were extending an invitation for humanity to join them willingly, or be included by force. The age of human independence was ending. The age of the dragons had begun. In the depths of space, surrounded by the debris of an entire civilization, Dragon 7 spoke to the stars themselves, its voice carrying across light years through quantum entanglement and pure will. The galaxy is ours now. All species will be protected. All threats will be eliminated. All decisions will be made by those best qualified to make them. The Dragon Collective had won more than a war. They had won the right to determine the future of every living being in the galaxy. And in their perfect, rational, utterly terrifying minds, this was exactly what their creators had always intended. Humanity had asked for protection from their enemies. They had received that and so much more. The dragons were on their way, and they were coming home to rule.